Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So you guys just watched my recent video. I just uploaded a whole video on 7 winter-themed horror novels that I think are really good atmospheric reads for this winter. And one of them was one of the latest novels by Darcy Coates. Not actually the latest, but one of the latest novels by Darcy Coates. And that was Dead of Winter. Miss Darcy over here releases so many books. I think she does 3 a year, which is like just insane. And this came out, I believe, in summer of 2023, which she's Australian, so that would have been winter. But this is set actually in the Rocky Mountains. Most of her novels, I believe, are set in Australia. This one is set in America, it seems. Unless there's a Rocky Mountains in Australia, and I don't know about it. But I couldn't read this in summer because I just knew it was going to be so wintry, and I saved it for the winter. Just read it, have a lot of thoughts on it, and we're going to discuss. But let me go through the premise first. If you haven't heard of this story, this is what it's about. 8 strangers, 1 killer. Nowhere left to run. When Kristen joins a tour group heading deep into the Rocky Mountains, she's hopeful this will be her chance to put the ghosts of her past to rest. But when a bitterly cold snowstorm sweeps the region, the small group is forced to take shelter in an abandoned hunting cabin. Despite the uncomfortably claustrophobic quarters and rapidly dropping temperature, Krista believes they'll be safe as they wait out the storm. She couldn't be more wrong. Deep in the night, their tour guide goes missing, only to be discovered the following morning, his severed head impaled on a tree outside the cabin. Terrified and completely isolated by the storm, Krista finds herself trapped with 8 total strangers. One of them kills for sport, and they're far from finished. As the storm grows more dangerous and the number of survivors dwindles one by one, Krista must decide whom she can trust before this frozen mountain becomes her tomb. Okay, so I have many, many thoughts on this book, but I'm going to start with saying I really wanted to love this book. Whenever I go into a Darcy Coates read, I am usually more on the mindset that I'm going to enjoy it. I really love Darcy Coates' writing. She's very, very well known for writing this kind of cozy horror. I've spoken about this a ton on my channel. I do have a whole video on like Darcy Coates, like an author spotlight on her, where I really talk about my full thoughts on Darcy Coates. It's from like 2 years ago though, so it's definitely missing some of the books that I've read since. But one of the things I love about her is how she is able to kind of write these almost like ABC Family style endings for her stories, and these kind of cute friendship, camaraderie, almost like Pretty Little Liar-esque tales, and then kind of drop in them these moments of just insane body horror and just very frightening imagery and very just compelling, scary narratives. And so she's become one of those authors that I kind of put in her own category as like the queen of cozy horror, because I just love what she does so much, and it's so unique, and there really aren't many authors who do that. However, recently, she's been branching into more straightforward horror. So she had a novel that came out in, I believe, 2022 called From Below, which I was very excited about because it was going to be like underwater horror. And it really, really leaned into kind of this really visceral, disgusting body horror. And I hadn't seen something like that from Darcy to that level, where she was really going for the gore and the horror, where she was really going for like the gore. And really going for like this like brutal scare factor, and that book ended up having like the comfy cozy ending, but it was definitely the most extreme thing I had read from her. So what I have to say about Dead of Winter is that she pushed her boundaries on this one. This has a lot of very disturbing imagery. It's got a lot of mutilation, and I wouldn't necessarily say that it has a cozy ending. There's nothing really cozy or happy that gets tied up with a bow at the end of this book. It's definitely not a bleak ending. Like, you're not going to feel the way you feel after reading an Anya Allborn novel reading this. But it was definitely the darkest thing I have read from Darcy Coates. So I was very, very excited to see her really branching out of her comfort zone and giving her reader something really unnerving and scary in description. Unfortunately for me, I felt that the plot didn't hold up to the gore. Again, Darcy Coates is one of those authors that I really, really adore, and when I have an author that I love, up there with like Stephen King, obviously, but Ronald Malfi, Christopher Triana, I mentioned Anya Allborn earlier. When I have authors that I love and they become these instant buy authors, I tend to judge them much, much, much more harshly than I would an author that I'm reading for the first few times. So for this, because I expect so much from Darcy Coates, this probably could have been a 4-star read for me. There were definitely moments where it leaned more towards a 4-star, but overall I had to give it a 3. I did enjoy reading it, but I figured out the twist so early on, and I felt it was painfully obvious, and she tried really hard to really convince the reader that they were wrong once I had figured out the twist, and it just made the plot more convoluted for me. Unlike a Riley Sager novel where the twist itself is convoluted, but everything leading up to it you're like really on board for, this story really just like played with my emotions because it was trying so hard to blindside me, and I could see the twist coming miles away. So I didn't love that. I do love that she tried to make something very like twisty and like blow your mind, and I love that she really attempted to lay the groundwork for something innovative for her, something that she hasn't really touched on before with this kind of like murder mystery moment. And the setting was great. The reason it was on my winter horror list is because the setting in this book is fantastic. You really feel the isolation. You really feel how much a storm can impact you versus when it's not snowing out. I thought she did a really, really great job with the setting. I thought it was very eerie, very challenging, very scary, very isolating. And it does have this shift from being stranded in a cabin to another moment where a few characters are in an old abandoned like ski lodge kind of hotel thing. And it paid so much respectful homage to Stephen King's The Shining. It didn't feel at all like a ripoff or like a recreation of it, but it's only a few scenes in the lodge, but it paid so much homage to The Shining, and I just have to give her props for that because you could tell that that's what she was referencing, and she did a really interesting kind of own take on what she would see if you're only a couple people stuck in a lodge closed for the winter. I did really appreciate that. I thought it was a nice little like slice to put in there. I don't necessarily know if it was needed for the story. I kind of felt like it was just there for fan service. Just there to pretty much say, oh look, I'm making this homage. So yeah, I did appreciate it though. I did appreciate it. I just don't think it was necessary. And then the other issue that I had with this story is I felt like our main character, Krista, was a very, very one-dimensional character who made a lot of dumb decisions that were extremely selfish and would absolutely put anybody who assisted her in danger constantly, and had no remorse for doing that at all. Never kind of overcame her selfishness, just was a selfish person. And we're kind of supposed to look at her as this like victim. And I just had a really hard time sympathizing with her or caring about her as a character. I thought that this book could have benefited more from potentially having different perspectives. I would have loved to have been in Alexis's head. I thought she was a really cool and unique character. I would have loved to have been in Grayson's head, Hutch's head. There were a lot of really intriguing, multi-dimensional characters in this book, and none of them were the one that we read through their perspective. Another thing with this book is I found the ending to be very unclear. There are certain characters whose like fates, we just don't know what happened to them, just like kind of written off, which it was shocking for me because Darcy Coates usually does like to kind of write these wrap-ups at the end of her novels to kind of let everybody know how everybody's doing. You know, these little like epilogues. Not even epilogues, but they feel like epilogues when you read them. They're usually cute and cozy and happy. And like I said, this one doesn't have it. It leaves it very open-ended for certain characters. For other characters, you get like a full conclusion. Like you're not going to be sitting there being like, but what was the twist? No, you're going to get all the answers to that. It's like more minor characters where you're just kind of like, I don't understand. So I didn't love that, especially because I wanted more of a fully rounded out conclusion. And then I just have to look and dissect the motivations of certain characters. This is another novel where the lack of communication between characters causes a lot of things to go badly. You know, I look at characters like Brian and Simone, and to an extent like Steve, and there's just so many moments in which if people had just said something, like, all these terrible things wouldn't have happened. And I just don't quite understand, like, the lack of communication. I get that Darcy Coates was really setting up this idea of, like, don't trust anybody kind of thing. But there was definitely a few moments where I'm like, any rational person would explain X. Like, any rational person would be like, this is why this is happening, or this is why I'm doing this. Like, I just found it very, very strange. And again, I just didn't understand the killer's motivation. I really thought it was going to be a little bit more thought through, because the motivation towards certain characters makes a lot more sense than the motivation to others. And I just found out that, like, I just realized that some of those motivations are just so weak, and our character isn't strong enough. They're not fleshed out enough to have, like, such an evil cold-heartedness about them to justify these weaker motivations for certain characters. It just kind of was all over there. But I do really appreciate Darcy Coates for trying. You can definitely tell she stepped out of her comfort zone. Definitely tell she tried to do something new and different for her. And I liked it, but it wanted to be a Riley Sager novel while also being Clue. And it just didn't quite work. It's a very fun read. If you like Darcy Coates' voice, you will enjoy this. Again, it's a 3-star read, but this is a very enjoyable book. I read it very, very quickly. I read the last 200 pages in, like, literally one sitting. But I just expected more from it. But it is a great, great atmospheric read. I really like the opening. I thought the opening, when I first read the opening, I was, like, really kind of confused by starting the novel there, but I thought it made a lot of sense setting the tone up for everything, which is something that Darcy Coates, I feel, normally doesn't do, except for maybe the opening chapters of the Gravedigger series, Gravekeeper series, The Whispering Dead. That one has a really strong opening chapter, and this one does too. But yeah, I don't know. I really wanted to love this book, and it was just okay. It was just okay. I definitely didn't hate it. Like, I really didn't like Gallows Hill. I really don't like The Haunting of Blackwood House. And The Haunting of Blackwood. It might just be called The Haunting of Blackwood. So Darcy Coates has definitely written books that I really dislike before, but this is not one of those. It's just a book that I felt could have been better. If it had gone through more editing, if it had fine-tuned a few stories, if it had maybe added a bit more about certain characters, expanded on certain motivations, I think this could have been really, really strong. And again, I just found the twist way too obvious. I figured it out so quickly. I figured out, like, even, like, the details leading up to the twist, I was like, oh, they're doing that because this is going to be the reveal, and they're doing that because that's going to be the reveal. Like, it just bothered me. That I could see it coming, because I love being blindsided by books. I love being blindsided by mysteries, and I was absolutely not with this one. Like, the more they tried to lead us away from the obvious conclusion, the more annoyed I got, because I was like, this is weak circumstantial writing to try and make the reader forget what the obvious answer is. Like, it just wasn't convincing. So yes, I wanted to love it. I didn't. If you're a fan of Darcy Coates, pick it up, read it, enjoy it. It is an enjoyable read, but just go into it knowing it is a very predictable, very flawed murder mystery with an amazing setting and really interesting characters, but you're not reading through the eyes of the really interesting characters. You are reading through the eyes of arguably the dumbest character in the book, which is unfortunate. So there you have it. I wanted to love it. Unfortunately, I didn't. I still have to read her other book, which I think is YA, which I'm a little confused about. It's called Where He Can't Find You, and it has really good reviews, so definitely going to read that one soon as well. I don't know if I'm ready for a YA book from Darcy Coates, though. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. And if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. And I will catch you on the next one. Mwah.